What if we lived on Mercury? It's the closest planet to the Sun and it orbits our star in just 88 days. And yet for all that proximity, Mercury is a frozen wasteland. What if we could somehow live there? Could humanity thrive on the first planet from the Sun, or would we be met with an early demise? Let's find out. The biggest problem with living on Mercury is the fact that it's so close to the Sun. This means that Mercury experiences extreme temperatures. The daytime temperature can reach as high as 427 degrees Celsius, which is hot enough to melt most metals, including iron and stainless steel. Of course, we could build shelters underground or perhaps create some sort of force field to protect ourselves from the intense heat. But then we have other issues to deal with, like the lack of atmosphere. Mercury has no atmosphere to speak of. That's not to say it has none at all. It does have an extremely thin exosphere, but it's so thin that it's almost a vacuum. This poses two major problems for human life. First, there's no air to breathe. Second, there's nothing to protect us from meteor impacts. We need to live underground on Mercury, which wouldn't be ideal for anyone who wants to experience what it's like to live on another planet. But for those who prefer their homes to be safe from extreme weather and meteor strikes, life underground might not be all that bad. Just make sure you bring plenty of light bulbs because it's very dark down there. But even if we could protect ourselves from the intense heat and perhaps build an artificial atmosphere, we'd still have to deal with one other major problem: gravity. Or rather the lack thereof. Mercury has a very weak gravity, just 38% of Earth's gravity. If we were to step foot on the surface of Mercury, we would immediately be met with a feeling of weightlessness. After a few weeks, our muscles and bones would begin to deteriorate since they wouldn't be used as much as they are here on Earth. There's also the small matter of Mercury being slightly toxic. The planet's core is mostly iron, and much of that iron has been found to be radioactive. It is thought that Mercury's core is actually a giant ball of radioactive space debris that was captured by the Sun's gravity and then flung into Mercury's orbit billions of years ago. As a result, Mercury's core is extremely hot, possibly reaching temperatures of 6,000 kelvins. The radiation from the radioactive core seeps out into the mantle and eventually to the surface, making Mercury a slightly radioactive planet. While this might not be a big deal for robots, humans are much more sensitive to radiation. In large doses, radiation can kill us outright. In smaller doses, it can cause cancer and other health problems. So we'd have to be careful if we ever set foot on Mercury. Now, if we want to talk about living on other planets in the solar system, then Mars is probably the best candidate. It's relatively close to Earth, has a decent atmosphere, and has plenty of resources for us to use. It's also got a fairly strong magnetic field that protects it from harmful solar winds. All of these things make Mars a much more hospitable place than Mercury. And yet, despite all of its problems, Mercury does have a few things going for it. First and foremost, it's extremely close to the Sun, which means we'd have a constant source of energy. Solar panels on Mercury would generate far more electricity per square meter than they do here on Earth. There's also the fact that Mercury is very dense. It's the densest planet in the solar system, in fact. This means that there's a lot of stuff packed into a small space. In other words, Mercury is resource-rich. All of the iron and other metals in Mercury's core could be used to build structures and machines. And the planet's mantle is rich in minerals that could be used for food and medicine. Finally, there's the fact that Mercury is very hot. This could actually be a good thing if we could harness it. Geothermal power plants could easily be built on Mercury, providing us with a nearly limitless source of energy. In fact, Mercury is probably the best place in the solar system for geothermal power. The only problem is that we need to drill very deep into the planet to reach the hot core. Mercury's crust is about 600 kilometers thick, so we'd need some very long drills. But let's say we could solve all of these problems. Let's imagine that we could build shelters that would protect us from the heat and radiation artificial atmospheres to allow us to breathe, and even artificial gravity to keep our muscles and bones from wasting away. In that scenario, living on Mercury would actually be pretty nice. It would be like living on a tropical island, except instead of palm trees, there would be giant space stations, and instead of beaches, there would be craters left over from meteor impacts. It might take some getting used to, but eventually we could probably adapt to living on Mercury. Our bodies might change a bit, but as long as we were careful and took precautions, we could probably live on Mercury without too much trouble. In the end, though, it probably wouldn't be worth it. There are just too many problems with living on Mercury. Sure, it's close to the sun and rich in resources, but that's about it. Everything else about the planet is either dangerous or just plain uncomfortable. The same can be said for Venus. While it's a bit further from the sun than Mercury, Venus is even hotter and has a much thicker atmosphere. It's also covered in thick, toxic clouds that would make travel between settlements difficult. And don't forget about the sulfuric acid rain. Yeah, you'd probably want to stay indoors on Venus if you ever visited. If we really want to live on another planet, then Mars is the way to go. It's got a thin atmosphere, but it's still an atmosphere nonetheless. It also has plenty of water ice that we could use for drinking and farming, plus, there's no radiation to speak of. Living on Mars wouldn't be easy, but it would be a lot easier than trying to live on Mercury or Venus. As for Mercury itself, it's probably best if we leave it alone. It's a fascinating planet, but it's just too dangerous for humans to live there. But that doesn't mean we can't visit. In fact, there are plans for a space probe to land on Mercury in the near future. The mission is called Bepi Colombo, and it is scheduled to launch in 2024. The probe is expected to arrive at Mercury in 2025 and will spend at least 1 year exploring the planet. One of the probe's main goals is to study Mercury's magnetic field and its interaction with the sun. Scientists hope that this will help them better understand how the sun's activity affects Earth. So while we may never live on Mercury, we'll still learn a lot about it in the years to come. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my others. I've made videos about what it would be like to live on other planets in the solar system, as well as videos about space exploration and the latest discoveries from NASA. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.